At 10:14 on a Monday morning, my husband leaned across the divorce table and said, "I want everything. The family house. Both cars. The lake property. Our investment accounts. The furniture. The boat he had used 3 times in 6 years. And every share of the restoration company we had spent most of our marriage building." My attorney Rachel Kim stopped writing. Across the table Grant's lawyer whispered something into his ear, but my husband waved him away. Grant looked directly at me. "You said you wanted this divorce finished quickly, Claire. This is how we finish it." We had been married for 22 years. For most of those years, Grant could look at me with that cold, patient expression and make me feel as though any resistance was childish. He had mastered the art of making greed sound reasonable. I looked down at the settlement proposal. He had highlighted every major asset in yellow. The 6-bedroom house in Westbridge. The black Mercedes. The lakefront lodge. Our company Rowan Heritage Restoration. The Harbor Point Hotel project. The savings accounts. Even the wine collection my father had started before he died. Grant wanted all of it. In return he would allow me to keep 3 things. My clothes. My father's old drafting table. And a neglected brick workshop on the edge of town that had belonged to my family before our marriage. He believed the workshop was worthless. The roof leaked. The windows were cracked. Half the electrical system had not worked since 2009. Grant had wanted to demolish it for years. "Sign," he said. Rachel leaned closer to me. "We should take a break." Grant smiled. "There's no reason for a break. Claire understands the offer." I did understand it. Better than he did. I picked up the pen. Rachel placed her hand over the agreement. "Before my client signs, I want the record to reflect that all business disclosures, loan documents, pending claims, environmental notices and contractual obligations have been made available to both parties." Grant rolled his eyes. "Yes, Rachel. We received your boxes of paper. There were electronic files as well. My legal team reviewed everything." His attorney shifted uncomfortably. That was the first sign Grant was lying. His lawyer had reviewed parts of the file. Grant had reviewed almost none of it. He believed numbers existed for other people to understand. During our marriage I read the contracts. I studied the engineering reports. I inspected damaged foundations and unstable roofs. Grant wore tailored suits, shook hands with investors and appeared in photographs beside finished buildings. He called himself the visionary. I was the person who made sure his visions did not collapse. Rachel looked at me. "Claire, you do not have to agree to this." Grant leaned back. "She knows." I removed Rachel's hand from the paper. Then I signed. Grant stared at my signature for a second. He had expected an argument. He had prepared himself to defeat me. My surrender disappointed him. Rachel added a final document to the stack. "This transfers all ownership interests, operational control, secured debt, contingent liabilities and contractual obligations connected to Rowan Heritage Restoration and its subsidiaries." Grant signed without reading the second page. Then the third. His attorney tried once more. "Grant, we may want to review the Harbor Point schedules before." I said I want everything. I watched him initial the bottom of every page. When he finished he pushed the agreement toward me. "There. Now neither of us has to pretend this marriage can be saved." I closed the folder. Our marriage stopped being worth saving long before today. His smile vanished. For a moment the room held 22 years of unspoken truth. Then Grant stood, buttoned his suit jacket and walked out carrying everything he believed he had won. He had no idea what he had just taken on. "My name is Claire Rowan. I was 42 when my husband left me for a woman who believed she had stolen a wealthy man. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She was 36, beautiful, ambitious and employed as Rowan Heritage Restoration's Director of Development." Grant told people Vanessa understood his vision. What he meant was that she admired him loudly. I had spent years quietly correcting his mistakes. Vanessa applauded them. The affair began during the Harbor Point Hotel project. I knew the exact date because Grant had used our company card to pay for champagne at a hotel in another city. When I asked about the receipt he said he had been entertaining investors. The investors had all attended a conference dinner that evening. Grant had been upstairs with Vanessa. I did not confront him immediately. That surprised even me. For 22 years I had believed betrayal would make me scream. Instead it made me observant. I checked the company calendar. I reviewed travel expenses. I read emails Grant had ordered his assistant to print and then forgotten beside the office copier. The affair was only the beginning. Grant and Vanessa were preparing to remove me from the company. They called it a strategic transition. Grant planned to file for divorce, claim that I had withdrawn from daily operations and demand full control of the business. Vanessa had already prepared a rebranding proposal. Cole Rowan Development Group. Her name first. Mine reduced to a decoration. But while Grant was building his new future, Harbor Point was becoming dangerous. The project had started as the most valuable property our company had ever purchased. A grand waterfront hotel constructed in 1912, with marble staircases, carved balconies and a view of the entire harbor. Grant saw luxury condominiums. Vanessa saw a rooftop restaurant. Investors saw millions. I saw cracks. During an inspection, I found movement in the eastern seawall. The ground beneath one section of the building had shifted. Old industrial tanks were buried beneath the parking area. Testing revealed contaminated soil. Then the city issued a preliminary remediation order. Fixing the property would cost millions. Abandoning it would cost more. Grant had personally guaranteed part of the construction loan. He had also used the Westbridge House, the Lake Lodge and several company properties as collateral. He did not tell me. But he had forgotten that my signature was required on the annual risk certification. When the document appeared in my office, I read every page. That was when I called Rachel. She arrived at my office after dark. I showed her the loan agreements, environmental reports and Grant's rebranding proposal. Rachel read in silence for nearly 40 minutes. Finally she looked at me. How much does he know? He knows there is a seawall problem. Does he know the estimated remediation cost? I emailed him the report. Did he read it? He replied, "Handle it." Rachel turned another page. The Harbor Point loan has a $12 million completion guarantee. Yes. And Grant signed the personal guarantee. Yes. Your marital properties secure the remaining balance. Yes. She looked at me carefully. If you fight for half the assets, you may also receive half the exposure. I know. Are you considering letting him take the company? I'm considering letting him take exactly what he asked for. Rachel closed the folder. Claire, there is a difference between allowing someone to make a bad decision and hiding material information. I won't hide anything. And I didn't. Every report went into the divorce disclosure. The contaminated soil assessment. The seawall repair estimate. The pending contractor claims. The insurance restrictions. The bank's right to demand additional collateral after a change of control. Even the licensing agreement connected to my father's restoration system. Grant received all of it. He simply believed the papers were an attempt to frighten him. 3 weeks before the settlement meeting, he came into the house carrying boxes. What are those? I asked. Your belongings. He had packed my books, clothes and framed photographs while I was at work. Vanessa had helped. I knew because one box smelled like her perfume. You could have waited until the divorce was final. Grant placed the box near the front door. The house will be mine. Nothing has been decided. It will be. He looked around the kitchen as though he were already measuring the space for Vanessa's furniture. I built this life, Claire. I stared at him. My father gave us the deposit for this house. And I paid the mortgage. Through income from the company I founded. We founded it. No. You joined 6 years later. His face hardened. That attitude is why we failed. Our marriage failed because you slept with an employee. He went completely still. For 1 second he looked afraid. Then he smiled. So you finally figured it out. There was no apology. Only relief that he no longer needed to pretend. Vanessa understands me, he said. She understands your title. She believes in what I'm building. She believes you own it. I will. He stepped closer. When the settlement is finished, you'll have your little workshop and enough money to start over. He said it gently, as though he were being generous. I studied the man I had loved since I was 20. Grant had not always been cruel. That would have made leaving easier. He had once waited outside my father's hospital room all night. He had once driven through a storm to bring me a forgotten set of plans. He had once looked at the broken buildings I restored and said he admired how I could see value where other people saw damage. Over time, admiration became resentment. Then resentment became entitlement. He stopped seeing my work as the reason for our success. He began seeing me as proof that the success did not belong entirely to him. What exactly do you want? I asked. Everything connected to Rowan Heritage. The assets and the debt? He laughed. There you go again. Always expecting disaster. I'm asking a direct question. I'll take the company, the properties, and the responsibility. I held his gaze. All of it. All of it. That conversation was included in my attorney's notes. So were the formal disclosures. So were 3 written warnings from Grant's own lawyer. He ignored everyone. The day after the divorce settlement, I returned to the Westbridge house for the last time. Vanessa's white car was parked in the driveway. My key no longer worked. Grant had changed the locks before the transfer was officially recorded. I stood outside the house where I had celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, and 22 wedding anniversaries. For a moment I felt as though I had signed away my entire life. Then my daughter Lily opened the door. She was 20 years old and home from college. Her eyes were red. Dad said you gave him the house. I did. Why? Because he wanted it. That doesn't make sense. Not yet. She looked behind her. Vanessa stood at the end of the hallway. Already barefoot in my house. Already wearing Grant's robe. Lily lowered her voice. She moved in yesterday. I felt the pain. But it no longer surprised me. I'm sorry you had to see that. Are you coming inside? No. I handed her an envelope. Inside was a key to the old workshop. My new address. Lily looked at the peeling brick building printed on the card. You're going to live there? For now. Mom, you lost everything. I looked past her at Grant's new life. Then I looked back at my daughter. No, sweetheart. I kissed her forehead. Your father just took everything. There was a difference. He would understand it soon. Grant hosted a celebration at the Westbridge house 3 nights after the divorce became final. Vanessa posted photographs online. Champagne beside the swimming pool. Grant standing beneath the balcony with his arm around her waist. A caption beneath the final photograph read, "New beginnings. Bigger things ahead." By the following Monday, the first bank notice arrived. The transfer of company ownership triggered a change of control provision in the Harbor Point construction loan. The bank required Grant to provide an additional $2.8 million in collateral within 30 days. He called me at 7:06 that evening. I was standing inside the old workshop removing rotten plaster from a wall. What did you do? He demanded. I placed the phone on speaker. What are you talking about? The bank froze the development account. That account belongs to your company. They say the divorce triggered a loan review. It did. You knew this would happen. Yes. There was silence. Then, and you didn't tell me? It was explained on page 43 of the Harbor Point financing schedule. I'm not talking about paperwork. I'm talking about you. I sent the paperwork to you, your attorney, and your financial advisor. You buried it in thousands of pages. Grant, the section was highlighted. His breathing changed. Call the bank. I have no authority over the account. Tell them you're still involved with the project. I'm not. You can't simply walk away from a development of this size. You demanded complete ownership. I expected you to help with the transition. You removed my office access before the divorce was final. Because you were becoming hostile. I asked why your girlfriend was approving contractor payments. Vanessa is the development director. And now she owns the development problem. He ended the call. 2 days later, the city delivered the formal environmental remediation order. The contaminated soil beneath Harbor Point had to be removed. The eastern seawall had to be stabilized before construction could continue. Estimated cost: $4.6 million. Grant called again. This time Vanessa was in the room with him. I could hear her voice in the background. She knew about this. Grant said, "The city claims we have 60 days to submit a remediation plan." That sounds correct. Who prepared the original engineering response? I did. Send it to us. It is on the company server. The file won't open. It requires licensed engineering software. Then open it. I no longer work for Rowan Heritage Restoration. Vanessa took the phone. "Claire, stop being difficult." It was the first time she had spoken to me since the affair became public. Her confidence almost impressed me. "You are legally required to cooperate," she continued. "My attorney will be happy to review any legal request. You designed the Harbor Point plan." "I designed a preliminary stabilization proposal. Grant rejected the cost." "That doesn't mean you can sabotage the company." "I haven't touched the company." Vanessa lowered her voice. "You're enjoying this." I looked around my father's workshop. Dust covered my clothes. Rainwater dripped into a bucket near the window. I was sleeping on a mattress in the upstairs office and heating soup on a camping stove. "No," I said. "I'm rebuilding my life." She laughed. "In that building?" "Yes. You traded a mansion for a ruin. My father taught me that ruins can be restored." Then I ended the call. Grant still believed Harbor Point was his only problem. It wasn't. Rowan Heritage Restoration had 6 major municipal contracts. 3 involved historic courthouses. 2 involved public libraries. The largest involved the restoration of Union Station after a fire. Those contracts required a certified preservation architect to serve as project principal. That architect had been me. The company also used a restoration process developed by my father. A method for strengthening historic masonry without replacing the original exterior. The license belonged to the Rowan Family Trust. The company had permission to use it only while I remained its preservation director. Grant had removed me from the company. Then he took ownership in the divorce. The license expired automatically. Once the municipal clients learned I was no longer involved, they suspended the contracts. The first cancellation cost Grant $800,000 in expected revenue. The second required the company to return a project advance. The third activated a performance bond review. By the end of the second week, Rowan Heritage Restoration had more bills than available cash. Grant called an emergency staff meeting. One of the project managers recorded part of it and sent it to me. Grant stood in the conference room where my father's photograph used to hang. Vanessa sat beside him. Grant announced that I had abandoned the company during a critical transition. Helen Moore, our senior architect, interrupted him. "Claire didn't abandon anything. You removed her." Grant's face tightened. "We are not discussing private marital issues. You made the marital issue a company issue when you fired the only person named in our government contracts." Vanessa said the company would hire another preservation architect. Helen replied, "You cannot replace 25 years of client trust in a week." Grant told everyone to remain loyal. By the end of the meeting, 7 employees had resigned. 4 of them contacted me. I did not recruit them. That distinction mattered. I told each one the same thing. Do not break your contract. Do not take files. Do not bring client information. Leave properly. 3 weeks later, I registered a new company. Rowan Renewal Studio. The headquarters was my father's old workshop. The roof still leaked. But the sign above the door was new. Lily painted it herself. She had stopped answering Grant's calls after he told her she needed to treat Vanessa with respect. "I'm not asking you to choose between your parents," I told her. "I'm not choosing," she said. "I'm noticing." The sentence stayed with me. Grant had spent years believing people were loyal because he controlled their salaries, homes, or relationships. He did not understand the difference between loyalty and dependence. On the 30th day after the divorce, the bank scheduled an emergency meeting. Grant attended with Vanessa and 2 lawyers. Rachel and I attended because the bank wanted confirmation that I no longer claimed any interest in the transferred assets. The meeting took place in a glass conference room on the top floor of Marlowe National Bank. Grant looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled. Vanessa wore a cream dress and an expression of practiced calm. The bank's chief lending officer opened a thick file. "Mr. Rowan, the additional collateral has not been provided." Grant folded his hands. "The company's assets exceed the loan balance. Not under the revised valuation." Grant glanced at me. "What revised valuation?" The officer displayed a photograph of Harbor Point's damaged seawall. "The remediation order and structural report have reduced the property's current market value. Temporarily. Perhaps. But the construction loan is secured by Harbor Point, the Westbridge residence, the Lake Lodge, and 3 commercial properties." Vanessa leaned forward. The Westbridge house alone is worth $4 million. It carries a first mortgage and a secondary lien connected to Harbor Point. Grant turned toward her. You said the house was protected. Vanessa's face changed. I said we could restructure it. The bank officer continued. The lake property is also cross-collateralized. Grant stared at him. What exactly is not tied to Harbor Point? The officer checked the file. The boat. Grant exhaled. Fine. Sell it. The boat is financed. For the first time, Rachel looked down to hide a smile. Grant's lawyer asked for a private break. The bank refused. There is another matter, the officer said. He placed a forensic accounting report on the table. During the review, we identified $1.9 million in payments to a consulting company called Northline Strategy. Grant looked at Vanessa. That's your vendor. Vanessa did not respond. The officer continued. Northline Strategy is registered to a holding company controlled by Ms. Cole. Grant's voice became very quiet. What payments? Vanessa crossed her arms. Those were legitimate development fees. For what work? Investor relations. Planning. Market research. The officer displayed 12 invoices. The descriptions were nearly identical. The payments had started 11 months before the divorce. Grant looked at me. You knew. I held his gaze. The forensic accounting appendix was included in the disclosure. His attorney closed his eyes. Grant turned on him. Did you read it? I advised you to delay the settlement until we completed financial due diligence. You told me there were risks. I told you there were unidentified transfers. Grant looked at Vanessa. She stood. This is ridiculous. The bank officer said, Please remain seated. I am not your employee. No. But your company received funds secured by this bank. Vanessa picked up her bag. Grant grabbed her wrist. Where are you going? She pulled away. Don't touch me. Did you take the money? I earned that money. For sending emails? For building the Harbor Point opportunity. The project is collapsing. Because your ex-wife designed it to fail. I spoke for the first time. The contaminated tanks were buried in 1958. I was not alive. Vanessa stared at me. Grant looked between us. The bank officer placed another document on the table. Northline transferred $700,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands 3 days before the divorce settlement. Grant's face drained of color. Vanessa headed toward the door. 2 bank security officers were standing outside. She stopped. I'm calling my attorney. You should, Rachel said. Grant remained seated. He looked older than he had a month earlier. Then the bank officer delivered the final blow. Because the collateral requirement was not satisfied, Marlowe National is issuing a default notice. You have 10 business days to propose a cure. Grant whispered. How much do I need? Immediately? $2.8 million. And after that? Remediation funding, contractor settlements and operating capital may require an additional $6 to $8 million. Grant stared at the papers. Then he looked at me. You handed me a dead company. No. My voice stayed calm. I handed you the company you demanded. You knew it was buried in debt. I knew it needed careful management. You trapped me. Rachel opened the settlement agreement. Every liability was disclosed. Mr. Rowan was represented by counsel. He rejected multiple requests for further review. Grant did not look at Rachel. He looked only at me. I thought we built this together. We did. Then why would you let it collapse? I spent 2 years trying to stop you from making Harbor Point bigger than the company could survive. You never supported my vision. I asked for soil testing. You wanted to delay everything. I wanted to know whether the hotel was standing on poison. Vanessa's attorney arrived before the meeting ended. She left without looking at Grant. That evening, Grant returned to the Westbridge house alone. The electricity had been scheduled for disconnection because an automatic payment from the frozen development account had failed. The refrigerator contained champagne from the party. The swimming pool lights were still glowing. Every room was full of expensive things he had insisted on owning. And none of them could save him. Grant filed a motion to reopen the divorce settlement. He claimed I had intentionally misrepresented the value of Rowan Heritage Restoration. Rachel's response was 73 pages long. It included every report, every email, every disclosure, every written warning. It also included the transcript from the settlement meeting. The judge read Grant's own words aloud. "I want everything." Then she read his attorney's warning about the Harbor Point schedules. Then his response. "I said I want everything." The court denied his motion. Grant tried another argument. He claimed I had destroyed the company by terminating the Rowan restoration license. The trust agreement answered that too. The license ended automatically when I stopped serving as preservation director. Grant had removed me. His own termination letter carried his signature. The lawsuit was dismissed. By then, Vanessa had been charged in connection with the Northline transfers. She claimed Grant had approved every payment. Grant claimed she had deceived him. The truth was somewhere between those statements. He had approved invoices because Vanessa told him what he wanted to hear. She told him Harbor Point would make him famous. She told him the divorce would free him. He told him I was holding him back. Grant did not ask questions because every lie confirmed something he already believed. That made him easy to manipulate. It did not make him innocent. The company entered court-supervised restructuring 4 months after the divorce. Grant sold the boat. Then the Lake Lodge. Then the Mercedes. The Westbridge house was listed for sale, but the bank rejected the first 2 offers because they did not cover the connected liens. The wine collection went to auction. Grant called me the night before the auction. "Your father's bottles are included." "I know. You're not going to stop it?" "I no longer own them." "You could buy them." "I could." "Then why won't you?" I looked at the photograph on my desk. My father standing beside the first building we restored. He was smiling, covered in dust, holding a bottle of wine he had saved for the project's completion. "I spent years believing objects kept people close," I said. "They don't. You loved that collection." "I loved my father." Grant was silent. Then he said, "I don't understand how you can be so calm." "I wasn't calm when you betrayed me. You never showed it. You had stopped paying attention." That was the truth. Grant had mistaken my silence for blindness. He had mistaken patience for weakness. He had mistaken my willingness to compromise for proof that I would never leave. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing." "You must want something." "I wanted honesty. You chose something else." He ended the call. Meanwhile, Rowan Renewal Studio grew slowly. Not magically. Not overnight. The first month we had only 2 small projects. A damaged church roof. A 19th-century schoolhouse with water inside the walls. Helen joined as senior architect after completing her notice period. 3 project managers followed. We worked long days inside the repaired workshop. Lily helped design our website. Rachel reviewed every contract. I refused to build a company where one person controlled every decision. All major financial transactions required 2 approvals. Project risks were discussed openly. No one was punished for delivering bad news. Within 8 months, the city hired us to complete a stabilization plan for Union Station. The contract did not come to us because I had stolen it from Grant. Rowan Heritage had lost eligibility when it failed to maintain the required licensed staff. The city opened a new bidding process. We won. Grant attended the public hearing. He sat in the back row while I presented our proposal. After the vote, he followed me into the hallway. "You took my contract. It belonged to the city. You used my employees. They resigned. You used my name. It was my name before it was yours." His face tightened. "You planned all of this." "I planned to survive." "Same thing." "No, Grant. You still believe everything is about defeating you. Wasn't it?" I looked through the glass doors at my team. Helen was laughing with Lily. 2 young architects were rolling up plans. People Grant had treated like replaceable parts were building something without him. "My life after you is not revenge," I said. "It is simply my life." He looked away. The Harbor Point property was eventually transferred to a lender-controlled entity. The city required the new owners to stabilize the seawall and remove the contaminated soil. Because our studio had prepared the most complete original engineering assessment, we were invited to submit a remediation proposal. I almost refused. The project carried too many memories. Then I walked through the abandoned hotel again. Sunlight entered through cracked windows. The marble floor was covered in dust. The eastern wall had shifted another inch. The building was wounded. But it was not beyond saving. My father had always said, restoration begins when you stop pretending the damage is smaller than it is. That sentence applied to buildings. It also applied to marriages. We accepted the project. Not as owners. Not as desperate developers. As specialists hired to make the site safe. The bank approved a phased plan. Remove the contaminated soil. Stabilize the seawall. Preserve the historic structure. Abandon the rooftop restaurant and luxury towers Grant had insisted on adding. The smaller project became possible only after his ambition was removed from it. 1 year after the divorce, the Westbridge house was sold. The proceeds went directly to the bank. Grant moved into a furnished apartment near the airport. He had lost his company position, most of the assets, and the reputation he believed made him important. He did not lose everything. He still had his health. He still had the ability to work. He still had a daughter who might one day forgive him if he stopped blaming everyone else. But Grant viewed every reduced circumstance as humiliation. He had never learned the difference between losing luxury and losing worth. Lily met him for lunch 2 weeks after the house sold. When she returned to the workshop, she carried a cardboard box. "What is that?" I asked. "Your photographs." Inside were family albums, Christmas pictures, and photographs of my father. Grant had kept them in a storage closet. Lily placed one album on my desk. "Dad said he didn't want them." The words hurt more than I expected. Then Lily continued. "I think he couldn't look at them." We sat together on the workshop floor. In one photograph, Grant and I were 26. We stood in front of the workshop on the day my father transferred half the business to me. Grant had his arm around my shoulders. He looked proud. I remembered the man he had been. I also remembered the man he chose to become. "Do you miss him?" Lily asked. "Sometimes. After everything? I miss moments. That isn't the same as wanting the marriage back." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I was angry when you gave him the house." "I know. I thought you were letting him win." "So did he. Did you know the company would fail?" "I knew it was in danger. And you let him take it." "He was determined to take it. I made sure he received accurate information about what he was taking." Lily smiled slightly. "That sounds like something Rachel told you to say." "It is." She became serious again. "Could you have saved Rowan Heritage?" "Possibly." "Then why didn't you?" I looked around the workshop. At the young architects working upstairs. At the plans for Union Station. At the photograph of my father beside the door. Because saving the company would have required me to continue saving your father from consequences he refused to acknowledge. Lily nodded slowly. "I think I understand." Grant contacted me one final time after the Harbor Point stabilization contract became public. He asked to meet at a coffee shop. When I arrived, he was already sitting near the window. He looked tired but calmer. No expensive watch. No tailored jacket. No Vanessa. Just Grant. "I heard you got Harbor Point," he said. "We received the stabilization contract. So after all of this you end up with the hotel. I don't own it. You'll rebuild it. We'll make it safe." He stared into his coffee. "Did you know from the beginning?" "Know what?" "That taking everything would destroy me." I considered the question. "I knew the company had serious obligations." "You knew I couldn't handle them." "No. I knew you would not listen to anyone who tried to help you handle them." His jaw tightened. "You could have fought me." "I did fight you for years. Not in court. In meetings. At the kitchen table. In emails you didn't read. In reports you called pessimistic. I thought you were trying to control me. I was trying to protect what we built." He looked out the window. "I honestly believed you were holding me back." "I know. And when you signed everything over, you believed you had finally beaten me." He did not deny it. "Why did you keep the workshop?" "Because it was mine before you. That building was falling apart. So was I." He looked at me. "And you fixed both." "I'm still working on both." For the first time, Grant smiled without arrogance. It disappeared quickly. "I'm sorry, Claire. I had imagined those words many times. In my imagination they gave me closure. In reality they were only words spoken after every other option had failed. I believe you're sorry about what happened. That's not the same thing?" "No." He looked down. You're sorry you lost everything. I needed you to be sorry when you were taking it. He nodded slowly. I stood. Claire. I turned. What did I actually take? The question sounded almost childlike. I could have said debt, liabilities, lawsuits, a contaminated property, a collapsing company. But those were only the obvious answers. You took responsibility for every decision you insisted was yours alone. He stared at me. That was what you never understood about ownership, Grant. I picked up my coat. You thought owning everything meant no one could tell you what to do. It actually meant no one else was required to save you. I left him beside the window. 2 years after the divorce, Harbor Point reopened. Not as luxury condominiums. Not as the monument Grant had imagined. The restored hotel became a smaller waterfront conference center with public gardens and a museum dedicated to the harbor's industrial history. One exhibit explained the buried tanks and environmental cleanup. We did not hide the damage. We made it part of the story. On opening night, Lily stood beside me near the restored marble staircase. You saved it, she said. No. I looked around at the engineers, construction workers, preservation experts and community leaders who had worked on the building. We saved it. That was another lesson Grant never learned. No one builds anything important alone. He had taken the house, the cars, the boat, the company, the accounts, the furniture. Every object he believed proved he had won. I kept a leaking workshop, my father's drafting table and the right to begin again. Grant thought I had walked away with nothing. But I had taken the one thing he could not demand in a settlement. My ability to create value without him. He took everything in the divorce. He simply had no idea that everything came with debts, promises, consequences and people who could no longer be controlled. And by the time he understood what he had taken on, I had already learned what I was capable of letting go. Sometimes revenge is not destroying the person who betrayed you. Sometimes it is stepping aside and allowing them to carry the full weight of everything they were so desperate to own. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Would you have fought Grant for half of the assets? Or allowed him to take everything along with the consequences? Subscribe to Her Final Move for more fictional stories about betrayal, intelligent revenge, hidden truths and women who finally choose themselves.